Referendums, allowing the public to weigh in at the ballot box on issues that affect them, used to be viewed as the ultimate in democracy, but some believe the process has been distorted in the city of San Diego and used as a tool to circumvent the democratic process. San Diego State political science professor Brian Adams joins me now. Professor Adams, since last year, business groups have gathered enough signatures to block 3 city council decisions: an update on the Barrio Logan's community plan, an affordable housing linkage fee, and an increase to the city's minimum wage. Is that what the referendum was designed to do?
Well, initially, 100 or so years ago, the idea behind the initiative in the referendum was to give citizens a voice. At the time, the state government was overrun by interest groups, especially the Southern Pacific Railroad, and the idea was that if the government did things that were catering to interest groups and not to the public can step up, qualify an initiative, and overturn laws that they do. Nowadays, in order to get a referendum on the ballot, it takes a large amounts of money. So most of the organizations that push these are very well-funded groups, like the San Diego Chamber of Commerce and other groups that are that are unhappy with decisions the City Council makes.
So then, would you say, has it morphed into something else?
Yeah, so clearly, I mean, if you look at both statewide as well as locally, the initiative process is generally used by well-funded groups that don't get their way in the legislative process. That wasn't the intent, but generally that's the way it's worked out.
So San Diego City Councilman Todd Gloria wants to make it harder to put referendums on the ballot. What are the options available to him to do that?
Well, to qualify a referendum for the ballot, you've got to collect a number of signatures based a certain percentage of the registered voters in the city. You have a certain amount of time to do that. Generally, these signature gatherers are paid. They're very hard to do with volunteers. So generally, an organization that wants to qualify a referendum, they collect a large number of signatures. And if you want to make that harder, you simply increase the number of signatures that are required.
So that's exactly what Councilman Gloria wants to do. He wants to increase the percentage of the required signatures for a referendum. How effective would that be?
Well, it would require that organizations that want a referendum spend more money on it, right? So instead of spending, a certain $10,000, they may have to spend $20,000 or $50,000 or whatever. The problem with that is that organizations that aren't very well funded, they now get priced out of doing referenda. Right now, generally, most referendum, the 3 that you mentioned, and most ballot initiatives are generally sponsored by well-funded groups. So generally, it's not going to be that effective because groups that have a lot of money will simply spend more, and the groups that don't have a lot of money generally don't fund these very well and very often anyway.
Councilman Gloria also wants to limit funding for signature gathering efforts at the state level. Does that run into potential constitutional problems?
Yes, so the U.S. Supreme Court has said that spending money on initiative and referenda is a form of free speech, right? If I sponsoring a referenda and I'm paying signature gatherers, the act of me paying those signature gatherers is a form of speech, and therefore government can't limit that unless they have a very compelling reason to do so, to protect the integrity of the process, to limit corruption, and so on and so forth. So generally, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down regulations that have tried to limit the paid signature gatherers. So for example, in Colorado, they tried to ban paid signature gatherers completely and have all volunteers. The U.S. Supreme Court said you can't do that. There have been a number of other more recent cases that have also said that, struck down government regulations of the signature gathering process. So it's very, very hard for government to try to limit the money that is spent on signature gatherers.
Professor Adams, thanks so much for coming on the program.
No problem.